The knife slipped against porcelain, the sound too sharp for such an ordinary dinner. A chandelier glowed overhead, spilling light across the long table where plates of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and salad sat half-touched. Voices overlapped in polite chatter, but I barely listened. My eyes kept drifting toward my sister, Rachel, seated across from me. Her laughter rose above the others, polished and confident, the kind of sound that always made people turn their heads. Rachel was everything I wasn't, at least, that's how it had always been. She had the kind of beauty people noticed immediately, the kind that demanded attention in every room. I had learned long ago that my safest place was silence. Tonight, I tried to hold on to that silence, blending into the background while my parents smiled at Rachel's stories and Daniel, her boyfriend, sat beside her with quiet interest. But Rachel noticed me. She always did. Her eyes lingered too long, the corners of her mouth curling as if she were setting a trap. "Daniel," she said suddenly, tapping his arm, "have you ever realized how strange it is that Luna and I are sisters? Look at me, and then look at her." The words landed like a knife in the center of the table. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My father cleared his throat, his gaze dropping instantly to his plate. My mother gave a tight, awkward smile as if pretending not to understand. Rachel didn't stop. "She's never cared about how she looks," she went on, swirling her wine glass. "No makeup, no style, nothing. Honestly, I sometimes wonder if people even notice her at all." Heat crept up my neck, a familiar shame pressing down on me. My hand shook against the tablecloth, and I prayed no one else could see it. I tried to swallow, but the lump in my throat wouldn't move. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she looked at me, daring me to respond, daring me to fight back. But I didn't. I never had. Then, for the first time in my life, someone else did. Daniel set his knife down slowly, the sound muted but deliberate. He turned toward Rachel, his expression calm but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "That's not fair," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The table fell silent. Rachel blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "I was just joking," she said quickly, though her tone faltered. He didn't move, didn't look away. "It didn't sound like a joke," he replied evenly. "It sounded like you were trying to embarrass her." His eyes flicked toward me briefly before returning to Rachel. "And honestly, I don't like hearing it." The silence grew heavy, thick enough to choke on. My mother shifted in her chair, her lips parting but no words coming. My father's fork clinked against his plate as he fumbled for distraction. Rachel's face stiffened, her usual confidence slipping. She let out a brittle laugh. "Come on, Daniel, don't be so serious. Luna knows I'm teasing. She's not that sensitive." The words scraped at me like sandpaper, and I forced myself to keep my head down, staring at the mashed potatoes on my plate. Sensitive. Weak. Invisible. She always knew how to corner me. But Daniel's voice broke through again. "I don't think it's teasing," he said. "And if you want me to be honest, it makes you look cruel." Rachel's smile dropped entirely this time. Her eyes flashed, but she didn't reply. The weight of his words settled across the table, heavier than anything she could throw back. I felt every gaze flicker toward me, then away, as though they were embarrassed to witness what had just happened. My pulse thudded in my ears. No one had ever stepped between me and Rachel before. Not my parents. Not friends. Certainly not one of her boyfriends. I forced myself to look up. Daniel's eyes met mine across the table, not pitying, not apologetic, just steady. For a moment, I almost forgot to breathe. Rachel quickly shifted the conversation back to herself, filling the silence with a story about work. My parents latched onto it, grateful to pretend the last few minutes hadn't happened. Plates moved again, glasses refilled. But I couldn't join them. My mind was caught, replaying every word, every glance. Why would Rachel's own boyfriend defend me so fiercely? I couldn't sleep that night. The words kept circling in my head, his tone, his steady eyes, the way Rachel had faltered for once. No one had ever challenged her like that, not in front of our parents, not in front of me. I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling, wondering what it meant. Why had he defended me so strongly? The next day, the questions still lingered. My mother called to thank me for not making things worse at dinner, as if silence had always been my duty. My father said nothing at all. Rachel, of course, didn't bother. But then my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. He had never called me before, never had a reason to. My hands shook as I answered. His voice was calm, lower than usual. "I just wanted to check on you," he said. I could see how much that hurt last night. For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, and I managed only a quiet, "I'm fine." But he didn't accept that. "You shouldn't have to get used to being treated like that, Luna," he continued. "It isn't normal. It isn't fair." No one had ever said those words to me before. My parents had always brushed it off as sibling rivalry. Friends avoided taking sides. But here was Daniel, Rachel's boyfriend, acknowledging the truth I had lived with for years. It unsettled me almost as much as it comforted me. "Why did you?" I began, but the words stuck. "Because it was wrong," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "Rachel can be charming, but she doesn't realize how sharp her words are. I couldn't sit there and let her do that to you." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my pulse racing. It sounded so simple when he said it, but the effect it had on me was anything but simple. Gratitude mixed with confusion, and underneath both was a dangerous thought. What if he saw me differently than Rachel expected him to? Later that week, the three of us ended up in the same room again. Rachel had invited me to join them for coffee, as though the dinner never happened. She was overly sweet, too loud, clinging to Daniel's arm in a way that felt performative. I sat across from them, uneasy. Halfway through the conversation, Rachel suddenly turned to me with that familiar smirk. "You know, Luna always had a way of stealing attention," she said, her tone light but edged. "When we were younger, she even tried to make people like her more than me. Pathetic, really." I froze. Stealing attention? The phrase struck me like a hidden blade. It wasn't just an insult, it was a claim, an accusation. Daniel's brow furrowed, but he didn't speak this time, waiting. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Rachel sipped her coffee slowly, her eyes glinting. "Oh, nothing," she said, dragging out the pause. "Just that you always had a way of inserting yourself where you didn't belong." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on her, but she avoided his gaze. My stomach tightened. There was more to her words than a careless remark. Something she wasn't saying. And for the first time, I realized Rachel wasn't just being cruel. She was hiding something. Rachel's words clung to me long after the coffee cups were cleared. Stealing attention. The way she said it wasn't casual, it was loaded. That night, I searched my memory for moments that could explain it, times she might have twisted against me. And slowly, fragments began to line up. There was the internship I never heard back from, even though the interviewer had told me I was a strong candidate. There was the scholarship application I never received a reply to, though Rachel had known the deadlines better than I did. At the time, I thought it was bad luck, or maybe that I simply wasn't good enough. But now the pieces looked different. 2 days later, the truth arrived in the cruelest way. My mother stopped by unexpectedly, carrying an envelope she said she'd found while sorting old drawers. It was addressed to me, from the very company I had once dreamed of working for. The seal was broken, the letter inside dated years back. "You never saw this?" she asked, frowning. I shook my head. My stomach twisted as I read. The letter wasn't a rejection, it was an acceptance. They had offered me the internship. I felt my hands tremble, the paper rattling between my fingers. When I looked up, my mother's face was pale. "Rachel used to pick up the mail back then," she murmured, almost to herself. The realization hit with crushing clarity. Rachel had intercepted it. She had hidden it. She hadn't wanted me to succeed, hadn't wanted me to have something she didn't. All those years I thought I wasn't enough, she had been the one pulling strings in the dark. I couldn't breathe. My chest burned with rage, But beneath it was grief, grief for every lost chance, every quiet humiliation that I had carried as my own failure. That evening, I confronted her. She didn't deny it. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her tone cold. You were always the weak one, Luna. If people gave you opportunities, it was out of pity. I just balanced things. Do you really think you deserved more than me? Her words cut deeper than the letter. And Daniel heard them too. He had been standing in the doorway, silent until then. When Rachel finally noticed, her face blanched. Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. Do you have any idea what you've done? Rachel opened her mouth, but nothing came. For the first time, she had no defense. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. If she was capable of sabotaging me for years, what else had she destroyed behind my back? The days that followed felt like peeling layers off a wound that had never healed. Once I knew Rachel had hidden that letter, I couldn't stop wondering what else she had taken from me. I went through old drawers, emails, even asked people I hadn't spoken to in years. Slowly, pieces surfaced, an art competition I'd been shortlisted for, but never notified about. A call from a friend who admitted Rachel once warned them that I was unstable, which explained why they drifted away. Each revelation cut deeper. It wasn't just one letter. It was years of small thefts, quiet sabotage, whispers behind my back that shaped the course of my life. My own sister had rewritten my story, piece by piece, until I believed I was nothing. One evening, I found myself standing in front of her again. Daniel was there too, silent but watchful. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. You've been stealing from me for years. Opportunities, friendships, even my self-worth. Why, Rachel? Why was it never enough for you? She didn't answer right away. Her lips curled in the same smirk she always wore, but there was no triumph behind it this time, only exhaustion. Because you didn't deserve it, she finally muttered. You were weak. And if people thought otherwise, I wasn't going to let them. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady. That's not strength, Rachel. That's cruelty. Her eyes flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw fear. But then she turned away, muttering something about everyone being against her, and stormed out. The door slammed, and the sound echoed like the end of something long overdue. Silence filled the room. I stood there, shaking, but for the first time it wasn't from shame, it was release. I looked at Daniel, expecting pity, but his gaze was steady, almost proud. You know, he said quietly, she's been tearing you down because she knew you had something she couldn't control. I didn't ask what he meant. For once, it didn't matter. I wasn't defined by what Rachel had taken from me. I was defined by the fact that I was still standing. Later that week, my parents admitted they had always suspected Rachel's jealousy but never intervened. The confession cut deeply. Silence, I realized, can wound just as much as betrayal. But instead of breaking me, it gave me clarity. Their silence was their burden. Her cruelty was hers. None of it had to be mine anymore. I walked out of that house lighter, even as the scars remained. Rachel lost her grip on me that night, not because I fought her, but because I finally stopped believing her. And in the quiet of my own apartment, I whispered the truth I had been waiting years to say. I was never the weak one.